So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar on COVID-19 frauds and scams and how to recognize, reject, and report these incidences. I am pleased today to be with my colleagues today at Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario to host this webinar on an important topic, and I'm pleased to host this in partnership with three important organizations: the Ontario Securities Commission, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, and the Ontario Provincial Police. So just to go through some logistic questions, I know some people have been putting information in the chat box. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. Whether you're joining by phone or by online, you will be muted. There will be an opportunity for you to ask any questions, or if you're having any issues as we go through, you can type those in the chat box. Either myself or Laura will respond to those questions, hopefully in an appropriate and timely manner. There will be time at the end of the session to have a Q&A session, hopefully around 15 minutes. It all depends. We may go a little bit over depending on how many inquiries that we get from our participants. There will be a short evaluation pop-up that will happen after the session just to get your feedback. I think there's only about 4 or 5 questions, so we would appreciate your feedback on how the session went and any ideas that you have for future webinars. The speaker contact information will also be presented at the end of the presentation, and we are recording the webinar that will be posted in a few days on our website and other partner organizations' websites. So it will be, this slide deck as well as the recording will be posted on those sessions. So just to give you an idea of what is going to be presented today, we will be talking about the new frauds and scams related to the COVID-19 outbreak. We'll be talking about how to protect yourself when approached by fraudsters, where to report frauds and scams, and also about what services and supports are available for victims. And you may, through the presentations, may have recurring information around where to report from our different speakers. But I think that information is really important because we are just knowing where to report, knowing the resources and what information the agencies can provide, I think will be really helpful. So just to give you a little background about our organization, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, we're a nonprofit organization based in Toronto. We have satellite offices throughout Ontario. Our vision is to ensure that all seniors are free from abuse and have a strong voice, feel safe and respected. We are building our capacity that requires, we want to build awareness, deliver education and training, work collaboratively with like-minded organizations, and assist with the coordination of services and advocacy. So we are funded through the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, and we have a mandate to support the implementation of Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse. And our motto what we go by in our organization is around stopping abuse and restoring respect. So, and just in follow up with the priorities of our elder abuse strategy, we really focus on 3 main areas, which is coordination of our community response, training, and public education and awareness. So we work with our community partners at a local, provincial, and national level around coordinating our response to elder abuse, working at the grassroots level to help and support those agencies. We do frontline training to organizations, healthcare services, financial industry. We work with our justice partners to host training education sessions and get information out to our seniors through public education awareness. And as many people may be aware, June 15th coming up is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and we will be celebrating the 15th anniversary, and you will be getting information shortly from our organization in regards to the theme that we're doing not only provincially but also nationally. So it gives me a pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We are joined by the first set of speakers is from the Ontario Securities Commission. We have Namita, we have Raja, and Andrea. So Andrea and Namita have been policy advisors for the investment office, and their focus is on investors' concerns with the securities industry. Today they'll be talking about proposed rules published by the Canadian securities regulators designed to outline how laws can address situations involving diminished mental capacity or the potential for financial exploitation of vulnerable clients. So thank you for joining us. We also have Sergeant Laura Lee Brown, who's the Community Services Coordinator for the Ontario Provincial Police from the West Region headquarters of OPP, and Jeff Thompson from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, who is the intake unit manager at that centre. So Jeff has been the senior RCMP intelligence analyst. He's currently managing the fraud prevention and intake unit at the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. He's been working there for over 20 years, and he's recognized as a subject matter expert, not only nationally, but also internationally. And Sergeant Laura Lee Brown is about to begin her 11th year of service as a police officer. Before that, she spent 10 years working in community social services. She's currently the Community Social Services Coordinator, and she's also responsible for the management of the Community Safety and Media Relations Officer, the Community Mobilization Officer, and School Resource Office Program for 14 counties that comprise the West Region. So welcome, everyone. We are so pleased that you're able to join us today to share your wealth of experience and knowledge with our participants today. So I'm going to turn it over to the Ontario Securities Commission speakers to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Rian. This is Raj. Thank you to everyone for joining today's call. I wanted to take a moment before we begin to recognize that, you know, this is kind of the new normal and everybody is going through this situation as one big family. But I just wanted to give our sense of thanks to all the frontline workers, the healthcare workers, and people who are stocking the grocery stores, and as we're fighting the fight against COVID-19. So thank you everyone for taking the time, and our goal here from the Ontario Securities Commission's perspective is to provide you a sense of the resources that we have, and also give you an update on some of the policy initiatives that are happening that we're working on with some of our stakeholders to better protect vulnerable investors, including seniors. So give you a little background of who we are at the Ontario Securities Commission. Our mandate is to protect investors from unfair, improper, and fraudulent practices. And we do that by making sure we foster a fair and efficient capital markets and confidence in those markets. And we have three distinct functions as well. We make policies and rules, we serve the board of directors, and we do adjudicating as well. Specifically about our team, the investor office, we lead the OSC's efforts in investor education, engagement, and we also do a fair bit of outreach to go into the community and talk to investors in person, over the phones, over our website, the resources that we'll cover today. And we also have our research function. And one of the key areas of our office is also the policy area, which plays a key role in the oversight of Ombudsman for banking services and investments. And that's an external body that deals with complaints from banks and financial institutions. We also provide leadership to the OSC in the area of behavioral insights, and we'll hear a little bit more about how that impacts investor behavior. And we are also working on a major project on improving the investor experience as well. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. So I wanted to kind of paint the picture of what fraud looks like in our landscape, and then go specifically into the situation we're facing right now and all the frauds and scams we're seeing right now. So 1 in 25 Canadians say that they're a victim of investment fraud. That seems like a number that is not so high, but then if you boil it down into a smaller subsegment of it, 1 in 5 Canadians say that they've been approached about a potential fraudulent scheme. So if you look around and there is, you know, 5 people, at least one of them has been approached by a potential fraudulent scheme. And then only 1 in 3 Canadians who have been approached by it have reported it. So the key takeaway here is fraud is an underreported crime, because we know that there are a lot more people who are getting phone calls saying there's a arrest warrant out for you, or there's phone calls saying they're from the CRA, and different kinds of frauds. And we'll talk about some of them today. But what the key message here is that fraud is an underreported crime. And our goal here today is to make sure that if you come across any of these schemes or frauds, make sure you report it to the relevant authorities, and we'll make sure we provide all the contact information to you as well. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. So coming to our current situation, we as the Canadian Securities Regulators umbrella group, that includes the Ontario Securities Commission as well, we put out a release warning investors about companies that say they have products or services that will help prevent, detect, or cure the COVID-19 infection. So this is completely an area where people are getting manipulated into providing their credit card details, or getting taken advantage of with all the global events and breaking news happening. And the fear in people's minds is making investors go and provide information that they should not be providing. And we'll talk about specific scams and frauds we're seeing in the marketplace. And we want to make sure that people have their guard up. And we as Canadians are often very, very nice to people. But the first thing I would say is, if you get a phone call telling you that somebody's offering you a cure for COVID-19, just hang up the phone. Don't respond to text messages, and don't respond to any messages of that sort, because at this point, there are only government sources that have reliable information about the situation. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. So we just wanted to give you a snapshot of what are some of the things we're seeing in the frauds and scams that are coming out in the marketplace. For people who are on the phone line, you can't see the slide deck, but I'll talk to it. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit is a new benefit that the Government of Canada introduced. And right after it was introduced, people were getting text messages saying, you know, if you want the benefit, click on the link and provide some information so that you qualify for it. That is a complete scam. And for people that can see the screen, Bill Morneau, who's the Minister of Finance at the federal level, put out a message saying, this is a scam, please do not click this link. And we're seeing more and more of that happening in different scenarios. For example, people are posing as Public Health Agency Canada employees, trying to get credit card details from people who think that they're getting in touch with a government employee, trying to get access to these benefits or get more information, or potentially get a cure for COVID-19. So what we're saying is these are complete fraudulent and scams and frauds that people should be aware of, and you should totally not click on any of these links or engage with these people. And there's more regional scams that we're seeing as well. So there's scams that we're seeing in Napanee about scam phone calls going around. And then there is the police are warning public of financial relief scams going around on Facebook. So we as the regulators and our partners in the law enforcement community, we're trying our best to make sure that people are informed of these latest scams and frauds. But the goal of this webinar today is to make sure you have these warning signs, and we'll talk about some of them as we go through the presentation. You know what these warning signs are, and you have your guard up to make sure nobody's taking advantage of you, your loved one, or people that are most vulnerable at this point to scam money from them. And
Did we lose somebody?
hello, can people hear me?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Hang on one second. Let me make sure my audio is good.
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, there are scams and frauds going around on a regional level and also on a more federal level that we're highlighting today. And one of the things that we're seeing more so is the pump and dump scheme. So that's targeting anybody that has money to invest, and investors are often getting unsolicited phone calls or emails. And we're seeing that fraudsters are using the current situation to market over-the-counter or penny stock, and as the demand for stock increases, they sell the stock and the share price plummets. So these are scenarios where people are using a specific time horizon, let's say in this scenario for the COVID-19 situation, to market specific products or services to investors, and it plummets and people lose money in a very short period of time, and these scammers and fraudsters take the money and disappear. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that people are aware of and people stay away from these schemes. Can we go to the next slide? So some of the other scams that we're seeing are Ponzi schemes. Everybody has heard of scenarios where people promise high returns and use investors' money to pay earlier investors. We're seeing some scenarios where the early the scammers are targeting people early on about potential cures for COVID-19 and using that money to pay people that they're talking to later. Affinity fraud is something that we've seen more so in smaller groups and groups that maybe share similar qualities, interests, or beliefs. If it's a church group or a group that goes to the same temple or any sort of religious association, people take advantage of that to get their trust and promote a fraudulent opportunity to that group. The other area we're seeing is offshore scams, where people are promising lower tax brackets if you send the money offshore, and people are promising that we'll share the huge profits and ship it back to Canada. And then pension scams is another thing we're seeing right now, promoting an RRSP loan to get into your locked funds. And then Forex scams, similar to offshore scams, where people are promoting the foreign exchange market to get easy access to money. So all these schemes that we're talking about right now, be it the Ponzi, and then affinity fraud, where people are targeting people's trust, offshore or Forex scams, all these schemes are areas where people need to have their guard up, and I make sure that they have the tools and resources to identify that this is a scam and that they recognize, reject, and report it. So we go to the next slide. So what are some of the warning signs of fraud? If somebody is calling you out of the blue, somebody's emailing you out of the blue, sending you a text message with a link or a message on your social media platform, talking about here are some of the information that you need to apply for your Canada Emergency Response Benefit or some of the other benefits that the provincial governments or the federal governments have introduced. That's something that you're getting from a source that you do not trust and that you don't know. That's definitely a big warning sign that it's a fraud. Another one is a high pressure sales tactic, that somebody's sending you something to process and you have to act now. You have to make a decision right now to either click on the link or buy the stock or buy the financial product. That again is something that is a big sign of fraud. Some of the other warning signs include free incentives, such as if you act now and if you buy this product or if you click on this, you get a free meal or you get a free accommodation. That is something that is a total warning sign of fraud. And some of the other warning signs include high returns with low risk. So at this time when the markets have so much volatility going around, rates are historically lower than usual. But if people are coming to you and saying, there is a very chance that this is a very high return investment with very low risk, that again is a warning sign of fraud, because any investment comes with some sort of risk, and it's our job as investors to evaluate, and it's our job as regulators and law enforcement community to provide you the tools and resources so that you can identify that it's a fraud. And another big one that we see is people who are not registered to sell you the investment or the product. This is an area that falls directly within our mandate at the Ontario Securities Commission. And I'll provide some more resources about how you can go online and check yourself if the person or business that's trying to sell you something is registered to sell you that financial product or not. So if they're not registered to sell you that product, that definitely is a warning sign of fraud. And going with that is another warning sign, which is if this product is going to help you avoid taxes, then that is a big red flag, because it's not only illegal, it's something that could make you lose much more money, because tax avoidance is a crime. And then companies that's about to be listed on an exchange is another warning sign, because you're acting upon knowledge that is insider information. It's not only illegal for the person that is giving you the information, it's also illegal for you to act upon it. And that's something that we take very seriously. So some of the things to keep in mind, again, the warning signs of fraud are if you're getting a phone call or email from someone you don't know, if it's a high pressure sales tactic asking you to act right now to make a decision, and that you will get a free meal or accommodations if you act right now. Those are some of the highlights that we're seeing right now in this situation, where people are taking advantage of COVID-19 and reaching out to people about potential cures, potential ways you can access government benefits. Again, those are definitely the big warning signs of fraud right now. So can I go to the next slide? So like I mentioned, if somebody is not registered to sell you the product, that's a big warning sign, because they have not gone through the process of making sure they go through the OSC registration group to have the educational qualifications and the background checks that we do to ensure that we're protecting the market and investors. So how you can check that somebody is registered to sell you that investment or not. You can go to our website, which is called checkbeforeyouinvest.ca. I'll repeat that again. It's checkbeforeyouinvest.ca. And that's the website where you can go and type in anybody's name who's registered to sell you something. That'll pop up. And then also the name of the business. And the registration categories is something that helps protect you from unqualified or fraudulent individuals, and make sure we're not having any bad actors in the industry that are taking advantage of people. So I'll go to the next slide. Okay. So what should we do what should you do if you come across these situations? So be very skeptical. We're very nice as Canadians, and we need to make sure that we don't have any problem with hanging up the phone or not responding to that text message or emails. So be very skeptical. Sorry, the slides moved. Yeah, thanks. So be very skeptical. Always question unsolicited investment opportunities. So be it coming from a phone, be it online, be it from someone you trust, be it someone from somewhere where you met the person and you have a sense of trust with that person. Always be skeptical. Why is this person offering you this when it's not public information or it's not coming from a government source? And one way to protect your money. The second one is make sure you get a second opinion. Before you invest your hard-earned money, make sure you're talking to a registered qualified advisor. And also you could talk to a registered lawyer or an accountant. And that's something that you can do to make sure the qualified person is helping you understand whether this is a good decision for you or a bad decision for you. It's always good to get a second opinion. And then, like I mentioned, you should not need to act on anything that comes across to you right away, because you should have the time you need to identify whether this fits your financial goals, whether this fits your personal situations. So you should have the time you need to evaluate any offers or any sort of investment opportunity that comes your way. If the investment is legitimate, you should not have to invest on the spot. You should be able to take the time to evaluate it. And always do your homework, because you have to make sure you understand how the investment works, what are some of the risks associated with it, and then any fees that come along with the investment, because that's an area where people definitely want to know how are fees impacting my investments. And as always, we are here to help you. If you have any questions about any of the stuff we're talking about today, if you want to check the registration of the individual or a firm, you can always call us. We're there Monday to Friday. 8:30 to 5 p.m. Our number is 1-877-785-1555. The number again is 1-877-785-1555. You could also email us, and we'll share the email after this webinar with everybody. And you could also talk to your local police. And we have some of our colleagues from OPP here as well, who will be presenting a little bit later. And then we have our colleagues from Canadian Anti-Fraud Center who will be talking about it as well. And they can be reached at 1-888-495-8501. And if we go to the next slide. So I wanted to make sure that we highlight some of the resources that we have created for investors to use. The first one is our website, getsmarteraboutmoney.ca. It is one of the most visited financial education websites in Canada. And what we have done, if we go to the next slide, we have created a hub that includes all the information that you might want to know about COVID-19 and your money. So we have articles about what the COVID-19 situation could do to your investments. How are your investments protected? We have an article about important financial dates and information, and we have tried to summarize the information from the Canada Revenue Agency, the Government of Canada, and the Government of Ontario to make sure you see the information that is relevant to your situation. We also made sure that we highlight some of the areas where the Government of Ontario announced the new measures for protecting vulnerable investors and seniors by helping organizations that provide grocery delivery or ways to communicate with their loved ones. So we've provided all the relevant information on that hub. Feel free to check it out. We encourage any feedback or any comments you have, because we know that's not an exhaustive list. It's evolving hour by hour, and we're trying to stay on top of the information as much as we can. You could also reach us through social media, and we're giving out information on Twitter and Facebook. We have smarter_money on Twitter and Get Smarter About Money at Facebook. And we have a newsletter which is going out sometime this week, which will have a lot of information about COVID-19 and some of the resources that you can use. You can sign up for that as well on our website, getsmarteraboutmoney.ca. If we go to the next slide. Okay, so with that, what I'll do is I'll give the mic to my colleagues, Andrea and Namita, to talk a little bit more about what the work we're doing about protecting older adults and vulnerable seniors.
Hi, my name's Andrea Magistano. Thanks, Raj. I'm a policy advisor with the Ontario Securities Commission, and I'm just going to briefly go over some of the policy initiatives that we're working on at the OSC. So over the past several years, the Canadian securities regulators have been focusing on addressing issues of financial exploitation and diminished mental capacity affecting older and vulnerable clients. In March 2018, the OSC published its senior strategy, which included an action plan to respond to the needs and priorities of Ontario seniors. So in order to protect older and vulnerable clients, we do realize and acknowledge that it's important to provide firms, so investment firms, dealers and advisors, with tools that they can use to take action against financial exploitation and to address issues arising from a client's diminished mental capacity, while also being mindful of protecting client autonomy. So one of the rules of the OSC is to make rules that firms have to comply with in order to protect investors, prevent misconduct, and maintain the integrity of the capital markets. So on March 5th, just this past March 5th, we published new rules for comment relating to two issues. One, a trusted contact person requirement, and two, requirements around placing temporary holds on transactions, withdrawals, or transfers in certain circumstances. So we believe that these new rules will help firms to better protect their clients from financial exploitation and the decisions that they make while lacking mental capacity. So the new rules are focused on vulnerable clients because we know that vulnerable individuals are more likely to be the target of financial exploitation, more likely to lose money once targeted, and less likely to be able to protect themselves. While our mandate initially stems from the OSC senior strategy, the new rules are intended to help firms protect all of their vulnerable clients, because we know that vulnerabilities can be the result of factors other than age, such as illness, impairments, and disabilities. So with respect to the trusted contact person requirements, the new rules will require firms to ask clients for the name of a trusted contact person and the person's contact information, and obtain the client's written consent to contact this person in certain circumstances. So these circumstances are if the firm has a question or concern about the possible financial exploitation of a client, if the firm has questions or concerns about the client's mental capacity as it relates to financial decision making, if the firm has questions about the name and contact information of a legal guardian, an executor, a trustee, or any other personal or legal representative, or if the firm is having trouble contacting the client and needs the client's current contact information. So note that a trusted contact person is not intended to replace a power of attorney and cannot give instructions on an account. It's more of an emergency contact person. So with respect to the temporary hold rules, the new rules are intended to give firms time to address issues that arise in two specific situations. So first, if the firm has a reasonable belief that a vulnerable client is being financially exploited, or two, if the firm has a reasonable belief that any client who is giving the firm instructions does not have the mental capacity to do so. The new rules also propose that firms be required to take certain steps if they place a temporary hold in these circumstances. These steps are: one, documenting the facts that caused the firm to place the hold in the first place; two, notifying the client of the hold; three, conducting a review, which may include reaching out to the trusted contact person, or if necessary, the police or public guardian and trustee; and lastly, notifying the client every 30 days if the hold is still in place until the hold is ended. We do believe that the proposed rules provides an appropriate balance between maintaining a client's autonomy and investor protection, given that firms will have to have a reasonable belief of the financial exploitation or lack of mental capacity before placing the temporary hold. We also believe that these required steps are steps that the firm must take in order to meet their duty to deal fairly, honestly, and in good faith with their clients. So you'll see that at the bottom of this slide, there is a link to the news release on the Ontario Securities Commission website that leads you to the publication. And we welcome you to take a look at these materials if you're curious about any of the details, or if you would like to submit a comment. And the comment period for these proposed rules ends on July 20th. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. The contact information for the Ontario Securities Commission is posted there, and also will be posted at the end of the slide deck as well. So thank you all for your presentation. We're going to now change to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Jeff Thompson will now begin the presentation from the Anti-Fraud Centre.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. So a little bit about the Anti-Fraud Centre and who we are. So the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is a joint partnership run by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in partnership with the Competition Bureau of Canada and the Ontario Provincial Police. Essentially, we're established as Canada's central fraud data repository, a trusted source for fraud data. And we play a crucial role in educating the public about specific scams and mass marketing fraud pitches, and using the information we collect to support operations and support victims and spread the word. So what we do, we have a centralized reporting intake. So our toll-free number, as our colleagues from the OSC pointed out, is one way to report. We also have our online fraud reporting system at www.antifraudcentre.ca. I will caveat that our toll-free number is currently not operational with the current situation, and we're working on getting this back up and running. So the information we collect, as I mentioned, is used for typically two things. One is to support law enforcement partners in Canada and around the world, essentially. And when I say law enforcement here, I'm not just talking about police. I'm talking about the Ontario Securities Commission. I'm talking about the Canadian Radio Telecommunications Centre, the CRTC, the Canadian Cybersecurity Centre. So we really take an integrated approach to using the data we collect to support operations, to investigate and disrupt the criminals. And then the second big part of our mandate is fraud prevention and awareness. So supporting victims, Canadian consumers, and businesses that have experienced fraud. Pushing out fraud awareness bulletins through our social media, through our distribution lists, and really spreading the word as much as we can. And the last point here is disruption. So it's really important to report because it helps us know what's happening and it helps us spread the word, but also we take steps here at the Anti-Fraud Center to shut down websites, block phone numbers, disrupt email addresses, and working with the financial sector to block accounts or other sort of financial transactions that we might be able to disrupt. So if we know something can't be investigated, the data we collect is very helpful in reducing fraud by making it more difficult for the fraudsters to operate. So we can go to the next slide. So essentially our mandate is what we call mass marketing fraud, which is a really large pool of frauds when you think about it. So what is mass marketing fraud? It's fraud or deception en masse, so committed over the media, such as telephone, mail, internet. We've heard about text messaging scams, internet social networking sites. So we know the fraudsters are using every means at their disposal to try and communicate their scams. And who is doing it? I describe fraud as a serious and organized crime. We know today that most scams being reported happen, it's coming from one country, targeting victims in a second country, and money going to a third country. So it's international in scope. To be able to operate across boundaries, you need to be organized. Therefore, it's serious and organized crime. And what can you do about it? As we've heard, recognize, reject, report. So recognize that the fraudsters are using the telephone, the internet, mail, internet social networking, text messaging to communicate their scams. Reject, hang up, delete, don't respond, and report. So we want to know what's happening. It's really important to report. Next slide, please. We currently capture over 40 different fraud types at the fraud center. So we know that the fraudsters are capable of profiling new scams to target certain age groups, occupations, consumer groups. We're not going to get into all these today, but I do want you to recognize, while we're here to talk about COVID-19 frauds that we're seeing, that at the same time, we know the fraudsters are going to take advantage of this situation to solicit other scams. So, it's not just going to be COVID-19 themed fraud. You're going to see a gamut of phishing scams, a gamut of other email scams. Recently I just got a text message from Netflix, a text message from Amazon, asking me to update my profile. So essentially what we know is that fraudsters take advantage of emotion. So they'll try and create emotions in individuals to get you to react. Whether it's fear and anxiety that currently exists with the situation, or it could be a prize, elation, romance, love. So there's a variety of different emotions out there that the scammers prey on. And not to mention just the social isolation that's ongoing right now. People are being told to isolate, people are alone, and it offers more of an opportunity for fraudsters to connect with people. Next slide, please. Give you an idea of the volume of frauds that were being reported at the center. Last year, we received nearly 400,000 calls to our toll-free line and 69,000 online fraud reports. We had over 130 million in reported losses last year reported to the fraud center. Next slide, please. So what are we seeing in terms of COVID-19 frauds? And this is based off ongoing reporting. We're up to about 130 reports since March 5th. So we're monitoring these on a daily basis. And again, we're also working with our international partners around the world that are seeing these scams, and collectively sharing information on the scams so that we can, identify and spread awareness about the different scams that we may see, are seeing, and will continue to see. So cleaning and heating companies offering cleaning services or air filters to protect from COVID-19. This is going to continue for, after the situation starts to subside. You're going to receive offers to protect cleaning services saying they're COVID-19 compliant. You're going to see sales offers saying air filters are COVID-19 compliant, first aid kits, and the list goes on. So there'll be various products and spins put on this current situation to try and sell you products. And so just be aware of the false, deceptive, misleading marketing that can happen. Local and provincial hydro, electrical power companies, we're receiving reports, where people are already getting calls threatening to disconnect your power for non-payment. So we know in Ontario, they've already, reduced the time of use consumption rates. So we're going to continue to see other sorts of frauds develop. And again, one of the most common ones is the extortion scam, where people get calls and businesses get calls saying, we're going to disconnect you if you don't pay it right away. Next slide, please. Center for Disease Control and Prevention or the World Health Organization. So we've heard about phishing, and I touch on phishing later. So essentially we know that the fraudsters are using the names of legitimate organization, Food and Drug Administration, World Health Organization, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada. They're going to say, they're going to use the keywords and buzz phrases of recognized institutions that gives themselves legitimacy. It's going to be offering fake lists for sale of COVID-infected people in your neighborhood. Some people might buy into that. Be aware no such lists exist right now. Giving false results saying you have been tested positive for COVID, nor would those lists ever be made available. Privacy information, right? Giving false results saying you have tested positive for COVID-19. So we have a report where an individual received a call saying that tested positive. In order to get their prescription and their results, they needed to provide personal and financial information. Next, yeah, perfect. So Red Cross, so this is a text message scam. There's other charities that are ongoing right now, but essentially this was a text. One of the first scams that we saw was a text message offering free face masks. You had to click on a link. It brings you to a spoof website that looked just like the Red Cross, and you had to pay a donation or delivery fees in order to receive the face mask. So essentially they're asking you for your credit card number. You may or may not receive a mask, most likely not. And subsequently, you may be signed up for a subscription where you're going to be billed on a monthly basis. Again, government departments here, phishing-themed emails, spoofing Public Health Agency, World Health Organization, and the list goes on. The phishing schemes, there's a new one just about every day coming out. Beware, again, they're going to use the urgency of the situation, the anxiety that exists. They're trying to get you to click on the links or open malicious attachments. And essentially, they're trying to steal your personal and financial information. Next slide, please. Recently, there, in the news, if people saw it, Toronto police arrested an individual selling COVID-19 test kits to the U.S. So it was a joint operation with our U.S. law enforcement partners. Currently, only healthcare providers can perform these tests. So anybody offering fast tests, no such thing exists, and only healthcare providers can do this. Next slide, please. So just before I hop into it, into the slide, going back to the test kits, the other thing we're seeing, there's all sorts of offers for free test kits, but we're also seeing, other types of scams via text messaging as well. I just mentioned the Shoppers Drug Mart scam. We've also received a report today of a Costco scam that's ongoing, asking you to complete a survey for some, for some free COVID-19 type products. And again, this survey, you click on this link and you complete a survey, and they're going to ask you for your credit card information to pay for delivery of the products. And again, you're going to be subscribed, and receive continuous billing on your credit card. The purpose of this current slide, 2019 top 10 scams, to show you the top scams reported last year and give you a sense of what the COVID-19 scams are going to do. So they're going to extort you. They're going to create, there's already fear and anxiety, but now you're going to get calls saying you've tested positive. You're going to get calls saying, your benefits claim is ready to be processed. We need your personal and financial information. They're going to solicit your personal information. They're going to claim to be government departments. Again, phishing we've already talked about. Merchandise scams, face masks we've talked about, but beware of the price gouging, the hand sanitizers, and other products in high demand. So be on the lookout. And in addition to this, job scams, we're seeing a few reports trickling on this as well, with the mass layoffs. People are going to be going online, seeing job offers. Beware of fraudulent job offers, where they might get you to sign up as a processing agent for the company, where your job is to receive payments and send the money along to the fraudsters, essentially. So they're getting you to act as a money mule, and other sorts of job offers that may pop up. Next slide, please. So how to protect yourself. Again, it's the recognize, reject, report. Here we're getting into the rejection side of it, but recognize again that, fraudsters are using email, internet, social networking, text messaging, every means possible to communicate their scams. And then reject. So here's where we really want to get people to not react, to stop and think about things before you react. As I mentioned, the fraudsters prey on emotions. They prey on people being in sort of a hot state where they're just reacting to requests that are urgent and high-pressured requests. So don't be afraid to say no. Stop and think about stuff. Do your research. Don't give out your personal information. The key indicators are requests for money. Any sort of request for money is a very big indicator you're dealing with a fraud. Many of these scams are unsolicited. They're unsolicited emails. Phishing emails are unsolicited. When your phone rings and somebody's asking for personal or financial information in an unsolicited fashion, another key indicator. So don't click on links or open any attachments. And be sure to protect your computer. Make sure your antivirus software is up to date. Make sure your operating platform's up to date. Ensure your digital devices are also up to date. It's not just your computer, it's your phones, your tablets, and everything else today. Next slide, please. Same goes for businesses. Know who you're dealing with. Don't just pay bills. Beware of unsolicited calls. Again, I mentioned the first aid kits, the cleaning services. People are going to be hiring cleaning companies to come into businesses to give them full-blown cleaning jobs. So beware of anything unsolicited. Again, emails, don't click on links, open attachments. Some of the suggestions are similar for individuals. Limit your employees' authorities. So in addition to phishing, we're also seeing increases in spear phishing attacks where individuals at businesses are receiving emails requesting urgent payments. So make sure there's processes in places to authorize payments or pay bills for that matter. So false billing, where you might get an email, saying you've ordered cleaning products and you need to pay this bill right away. So limit employees' authority, and then watch for anomalies. Typing errors, signature blocks are different. Somebody claiming to travel right now, which it shouldn't be in any sort of scam, but you never know. There's sort of these things that fraudsters tend to slip up on. Next slide, please. So what to do if you're a victim? Gather all the information pertaining to the fraud. So we want you to create a chronological statement of events before you report. We want to know, you should write down, who you talked to, when you received the call, what they said, have a real statement of events of what's transpired, and have all your documents, receipts, and emails and correspondence ready to go. If you're a victim, you need to report to your police. Fraud is a crime, and your local police need to know what's happening in the community. So it ensures that they're aware, and again, keep a log of all the calls that you make and document everyone you've spoken to and any occurrence numbers you receive. Report to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, again, through our online fraud reporting system is the way to go right now. And again, the information is very useful for us to follow through with the disruption. So to go after the websites, the email addresses, the telephone numbers, and so on. So, you know, while we don't investigate here, we certainly take steps to reduce the fraud and make life difficult for the fraudsters. Next slide, please. Report the incident to financial institutions. So, I mean, if you've sent money, you know, whether it's through a money service business, a bank, a credit union, an internet payment service provider, the first place you should be going is to those institutions to see if there's a chance of stopping the transaction and getting your money back. While we know in a lot of cases the money's gone as fast as it's sent, it also allows these institutions to document the fraud and be aware of what's happening to their clients. If the fraud took place online, again, notify the service provider where you saw the fraud. You know, whether it's an online classified ads site such as Kijiji, dating websites, you know, social networking websites. That most of these places have report abuse or report an ad. So it's really important, again, to report to the service providers, report to police, and report to the Anti-Fraud Centre. And the last thing speaks specifically to victims of identity fraud. You should be calling. The key step to identity fraud is notifying the credit bureaus with fraud alerts on your profiles. That way you get notified if the fraudster is trying to access any of your accounts down the road. I'll end there. So again, way to contact the Anti-Fraud Centre today is through our website, www.antifraudcentre.ca. Visit the website. We're trying to update, you know, our COVID-19 scam list, but also keeping a running list of ongoing frauds, other frauds that we're seeing. And again, it's not just COVID-19 frauds that you're going to see. You know, the fraudsters are going to take this opportunity to report, you know, to try and solicit you with a wide array of scams.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for your great informative presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Laura Lee, who's going to speak to us around reporting and the prevention issues as well. I know we may go over about 5 or 10 minutes. If people are able to stay with us, that would be really much appreciated. There are a lot of questions that are coming up, and we are trying to answer those as best we can. And Jeff, I know you're still going to continue with us, so if you don't mind maybe going through the chat box, there are some questions that were directed for your organization around the frauds. And if you have a chance, maybe you can just type in some answers as we go along. So Laura Lee, I'm just going to pass it over to you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ryan. And it's my pleasure to be here today, everyone. Thank you so much to our fellow panelists for that wealth of information. It's just fantastic. Thanks, Jeff, for highlighting the work of Canadian Anti-Fraud and our enforcement partners. There's so much right now that needs to be brought to our collective attention, and only by working together can we do that. So given that so much information has been given already, I'll repeat some things, and then I want to focus on prevention, because I really think it's important for people to walk away knowing and being reminded of the steps that we can all take on a regular basis. So it's a different world right now. This is an unprecedented time for us. We know that earlier this month, the province declared a state of emergency, which was again revamped on the 28th. Now our gatherings cannot be larger than 5 people. We know that non-essential businesses are closed. We have organized public gatherings are prohibited. So what does that do? That has people returning to their homes. So we know that members of the public across the province have been asked by the government to remain inside their residence and only come out for the things that you absolutely have to have. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? It means that people are spending more time inside, and when they're spending more time inside, they're often spending that time online or being free to answer the phone on a more consistent basis. And so, as was mentioned several times earlier, we really need to have our guard up during these times because we're spending so much time. Next slide, please. But essentially what's happening is that it continues to be all about the money. At this particular time and on this call, we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, but the fact of the matter is these scams, there's nothing new about them. This is unfortunately just the latest tactic that these criminals are using to frighten and instill fear into our communities. So we know, and as Jeff was saying, that different types of frauds and crimes will continue, and that these individuals are preying upon and then subsequently capitalizing on those fears. We know that fraudsters purposely intend to seek out vulnerable individuals, and they use pressure tactics, and that was certainly brought up by our earlier speakers, and I'll speak more to that in just a moment. Next slide, please. So, as was mentioned earlier, it often goes unreported, and I think that this is an important graphic because in Ontario alone, we know, as Jeff was saying, in 2019, it's staggering that $130 million were reported losses. So if you look at this graphic, that's the amount of unreported losses is just in the billions. So we know how important it is to actually recognize and report so that we do have a size or a sense of the size and scope of what's happening within our communities. Next slide, please. So I often get asked, especially if they are attempts, why should I report? But we know that not only is it critical for us to be able to track using partners like CAFC, OSC, but the attempts should be reported because that information is also shared with us as police. And whether you've sustained a loss or not, we strongly encourage everyone to report that. Next slide, please. And the fact of the matter is, just because somebody wasn't successful scamming you doesn't mean that the next person won't be. So we have to assume that for every attempt, there will be a success. So think about that from a personal perspective. And that next success might be a family member, it might be a friend, it might be a neighbor. So the reporting of this is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. If you have sustained a loss, a financial loss, we do want to know. And as I was just saying, where there are attempts, we know that there are actual frauds that have been completed. We would ask that people contact us. As far as the Ontario Provincial Police is concerned, we ask that you call our non-emergency number, and that is listed there for anyone that doesn't have access to the slides. Again, it's 1-888-310-1122. And it's important to know that whether they are reported, whether you report your information online or by a phone call, and they are received by police from the CAFSC, or if you call us directly, those reports are received and investigated by police officers. Next slide, please. So some of the other questions we've been asked as of late is, how does the current COVID-19 pandemic affect our response? And I'll begin by saying that the safety of the public and the safety of our members are our priorities. So if we can handle your matter over the phone for the safety of all, then we will. If you do require a police officer to attend, depending on what the circumstances, you will be asked a series of screening questions, and then that assists our members in understanding whether or not additional PPE or personal protective equipment is required, and will still maintain physical distancing and keeping space. But the bottom line is, if you need us, we'll be there. So unlike many other things, and even with us, our response model might look a little bit different now, like many of our partners and other business providers, but our business hours remain the same. We're still 24/7, 365 days a year. If you need us, we will be there. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, one of the things we also hear is that I don't want to bother the police. You know what, it's not a big deal. I don't want to bother them. They're so busy. And so let me be clear when I say that you reporting is not a bother, and we are not ever too busy to hear from you. As I said earlier, we never close. And online reporting for other criminal activities is also and always available. So if you go on to our website, our general website for the province, it's www.opp.ca. There are instructions and links to take you to not only our online reporting, but the criteria for that. You'll see that some things do not meet the criteria, and what that means is it means that we want you to call us. So the second point of, but nothing happened or it wasn't a large amount, again, it doesn't matter. We want you to be reporting to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre for those attempts that are made, and we certainly want you to contact police regardless of where you reside for actual losses that you sustain that are that merit investigation. And I'll end that slide just by reiterating the fact that regardless of the amount, no amount of victimization is an acceptable amount, and we want to help. Next slide, please. So when I speak to people, it's very interesting because the common theme that comes out every time is, well, I never ever saw myself as a victim, or I feel so stupid, and, you know, I'm an educated person, I have a good job, I don't understand how this happened to me. Conversely, I've spoken with many older adults who said, I've gone through my entire life, I don't understand how foolish I could have been at this stage of the game that that I fell victim to a scam at this point. But the fact of the matter is, it can and does happen to anyone, any age, any time, any socio-demographic background, and any place. So the takeaway here is that victims are not fools, but we have to remember that these are professional criminals. And it certainly was brought forward earlier with Jeff's presentation, in the sense that not only are they professionals, but they are a wide web of professionals that are working together constantly. Next slide, please. And the truth of the matter is, we don't recover all of the losses that are reported to us. And it's very important to be honest about that. And that's not to say in any way that all exhaustive investigative efforts aren't undertaken. But the reality is sometimes there just is not enough information, and we are unable to recover those losses. And as such, they're gone for good. And it's why the importance of prevention is absolutely paramount. So as I alluded to earlier, in this province alone, the losses are estimated, and we don't have concrete figures, but the losses are estimated to be in the billions of dollars a year. And if you think about that from an emotional perspective, that's, you know, billions of dollars of friends and families and loved ones' hard-earned money that they aren't getting back. We know, again, that these are sophisticated crimes with sophisticated criminals, and they're always trying to seek out new ways to acquire new targets and to develop new ways to scam people. And what doesn't assist us in any way with that is that there's an anonymity, of course, with internet and telephone fraud that makes it exponentially more difficult to investigate, and at times, again, honestly, impossible. And the reality is that many of the victims that we speak with and that we have interactions with state that they trusted the voice on the other end of the line and the instructions that they received on the computer, and unfortunately became victims as a result. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting question. You know, what can I do? Well, what can we all do to prevent becoming a victim of fraud? So this is it's a very different time for each and every one of us, and we're trying to sift our way through together and learn how to navigate. But it's uniquely it's a unique opportunity for each of us to take this time as we are self-isolating and staying within our residence, to use that as an opportunity to educate ourselves and to watch out for one another by picking up the phone or reaching out and emailing and assisting one another to collectively, and I will emphasize the word collectively, stop this behavior. And you know, it's going to sound very simple, but there are a couple of steps that we encourage everyone to take every single time. And they, as I said, seem very simple, but they're tested and they're true. So next slide, please. The first is stop the clock. And both Jeff and Raj both brought this up earlier with the feeling pressure to say yes now. Oh, it's such a good deal, or I don't want to lose this opportunity, or this investment looks fantastic. I'm not sure if it'll come around again. The reality is, and something they will never tell you, is that you remain in the driver's seat with your money, and they know it. And they're hoping that enough pressure is going to make you forget that. So what we all need to do is slow down. Because the fact of the matter is, we would never, ever go and throw tens of thousands of dollars away on a whim, ever. When we make large-scale purchases, as an example, we take our time, we do our homework. And so regardless of the product, the investment, the amount, the advice is the same. Slow things down. Say no right off the hop. There's no reason that a reputable business, company, charity should have any issue with you wanting to take some time to think about it, do some research, and then come back. This is essentially up to you each and every time. So once you've said no, take a step back, do some research, do some comparison. And as it was brought up earlier, if the dollar amount or the cost and the list price of something is absolutely and exponentially lower than that of almost every other competitor, then I will say that if it's too good to be true, it is. So do your research and then decide whether or not to proceed. Because if somebody has called you, which was also brought up, very rarely are people cold called for things, for services, for investments, for these types of things. So if somebody's reaching out to you, decline, do your research, and then decide whether or not you want to reach back. But before you do, we ask that you report that attempt. Report it for you, report it for your neighbors, for your family, for your community, and for all of us, so that we can continue to investigate that. And as Jeff said, so that we can continue to disrupt these efforts. Next slide, please. So this is another one. I started thinking about my own family members, particularly older family members. And they are a respectful, polite generation. And it's something that we are known for, not only as a generation, but certainly as a nation. And that's generally a really good thing. But it's very important to know that when we are put into these situations, that's exactly what scammers are looking to do. They're looking to capitalize on that emotion. They're looking to capitalize on your good gestures and your kindness. And they are waiting for that. So you can be polite and then you can hang up, because often, especially over the phone, when you have the opportunity to get someone on the line, and we find this so many times where folks are kept on the line for long periods of time, and the longer you stay on, the more chance you have of being convinced to do something you would not normally otherwise do. So Raj brought this up before, so forgive my repetitiveness, but it's worth repeating that we get a second opinion for a lot of things. And there's a reason that second opinions exist. There's a reason that quotes exist. If there's something, especially that you might be interested in but do not have any prior experience with, then our collective advice on this teleconference would be to get a second opinion before you say yes. And again, repeating that any reputable company, business, or charity should have no issue whatsoever with that. Next slide, please. So from a policing standpoint, how can we help? And I'll speak specifically to the OPP, but certainly any municipal police force will be able to assist you. The services and bureaus and units they have might just be called something different or look a little different. But the reality is that when a fraud is reported to the police, it gets assigned to our frontline members, frontline police officers. So sometimes those reports are significant and substantial in nature, and when that is the case, we will engage the assistance of our crime unit members. And then if the fraud is extremely specific or requires an additional level of assistance or expertise, thankfully within our organization we have many different specialty units to assist us, and I've listed some of them here today. Our serious fraud office, anti-rackets branch, or cyber crimes investigation unit. So depending on the type of occurrence and the severity, then we can bring in many hands to assist with the work. But the bottom line is, regardless of who gets the call and who takes it and starts running with it, these occurrences are investigated as thoroughly as we possibly can. We may not always have answers, but the investigative efforts are certainly undertaken. Next slide, please. Some of the other things that I wanted to point out and ways that we continue to assist in our communities is that we work very regularly and very closely with our community partners. We're involved with many different initiatives and community projects, and this teleconference and webinar, quite frankly, being one of them. And our members are providing frontline public education and online resources in every community that we serve across the province. I'd ask that anyone looking for more information, you could either contact the detachment in your particular geographic area, or a good place to start would be just visiting our website at opp.ca. You can see I've listed one of the excellent resources that we have on there, but all of our detachments and the ways to contact them are also listed on there. So we do have a resource guide called Living Well, Aging Well, and it has just a myriad of resources in there as well. So I would encourage you, if you've not ever visited our website, please do so. Next slide, please. I think, and I will end it with this, because my role in preventative and community education is just to be with the public, to understand what some of the issues are in our community and figure out what our role is in assisting and making people feel safe and providing them the resources they need to do so. So I'll sum it up by saying that Sir Robert Peel really did say it best, that the police are the public and the public are the police. We need your help. This situation is no different. The eyes and ears and reports of people across this province are what help us keep our community safe, and I thank you on behalf of all of us for that. And I really think that it's such an important way to end this, because we really do need to work together to get through this and to get through any other situation that could possibly pose a risk or a safety issue to our communities. And the only way to do that really is collaboratively. So thank you very much to Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to each and every one of you that have participated in the webinar. As you can see, our phone number again, if you do not have access to the slides, is 1-888-310-1122. That's our non-emergency line. And of course, in any emergency, anytime, please dial 911. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Just to recap just quickly some of the numbers that or information supports that are available. We've given those numbers. Someone did mention in the chat box about Crime Stoppers. That is also an option for people to report anonymously if they have any information that they would like to inform the police about. That is available for people to call as well. I did put up a couple other organizations that do have information around frauds and scams, and also resources that you can access, including the Better Business Bureau, Ministry of Consumer Services, and the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. And then lastly is just a list of different other organizations, again, that relate to more elder abuse and safety and security issues around older adults that are listed here too. So the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and Age, the National Initiative for the Elderly, the International Federation on Aging, and then the government site around Stop Family Violence. There's a number of resources and information there that people can access and download at their own will. We also have social media. We do encourage people to follow us, whether that's organizations or individually. Laura Proctor, who's been monitoring some of the questions, manages that and is very good about getting information. So I am going to turn it over to some questions if people are still willing to stay with us. I'm going to ask Laura to facilitate that, because she's been sort of moderating the questions as they have been coming in. So I will ask Laura to take over those questions.
Absolutely, Rayanne. Thank you so much. So we are getting quite a few questions, so I do apologize if we're not able to answer all of the questions live right now, but all of the presenters today will get a list of questions and we'll be able to answer them one-on-one. So we'll start with an ongoing question that's been occurring throughout the webinar. If we could get some clarification around what a dead air scam is.
Hi, it's Jeff Thompson from the Anti-Fraud Center here. So essentially, a dead air call happens when a call center calls an individual. So it's a machine that's calling your telephone number. When that machine dials your number and you connect to it, there's nobody available. There's no agent available to speak to you in that call center. You're going to get a dead air call. I think in this case, what some people may be referring to is what sometimes I hear the term one ring scams. So essentially, your phone rings and there's an international number appearing on your call display. And some of these frauds are designed to get you to call these international numbers back. So beware, if you don't recognize the number, don't call it back, especially if it's a long distance international number. Also beware, you could be dialing a pay-per-use telephone number where you're going to get charged by the minute. So I mean, if you don't recognize the number in your call display and there is no message, don't call it back.
Thank you very much for that clarification. We also are getting a lot of questions wanting clarification around the pump and dump.
Hi, it's Raj from the Ontario Securities Commission. Thank you for the question. So pump and dump schemes are where fraudsters often spread positive but false information where it lures investors to purchase the stock. And with the age of social media and the news being hyped up, the false information spreads very rapidly, either through social media or promotional campaigns. And what happens is more and more investors purchase the stock and the stock price becomes more and more inflated and it gets pumped up. And then once the stock reaches a high point, then the fraudsters quickly dump their stock because the hype is ended and they have a considerable payout for themselves and they vanish from the scene. And the remaining investors lose the money that they have invested. So that essentially is what a pump and dump scheme is. And we're seeing instances of that happening in the COVID-19 situation. So that's one of the big reasons why we want to make sure people are aware of all the warning signs. So that's what it is. Happy to answer any more questions as well.
Wonderful, thank you, Raj. Another question is asking, stating that she is an elder abuse coordinator within her region. What happens if one of her clients signs a power of attorney and that person exploits their finances? So that is a big question and sort of outside the frauds and scams. Sergeant Brand, would you be able to speak to this briefly?
So just to reiterate the question, Laura, so that I'm correct, is somebody abusing the power of attorney for property, is that correct?
Yes, and exploiting their finances.
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. And again, I'm a police officer, not a lawyer, so I'm going to clarify that again. And I would insist that anyone that is specifically looking for legal advice that they contact their own lawyer. But having said that, the power of attorney for property is very different than the power of attorney for personal care. And in case there are people that are not aware of the difference, the power of attorney for personal care, so meeting your personal care needs, that actually only takes effect when you are not capable of making those decisions for yourself. And that is very different from the power of attorney for property, where you actually have to stipulate in that only is enacted when you are incapable, because otherwise whoever you list as your power of attorney for property has instant access to your finances. So there have been amendments and changes to the Criminal Code of Canada that speak to offenses relating to power of attorney for property. But in the meantime, while you're trying to determine whether or not a loved one's finances are being mishandled, you could certainly contact your lawyer and request what's referred to as a passing of accounts. The term is passing of accounts. And so what that does is that it has the power of attorney for property become required to provide documentation showing where that money is being spent. And so that's done through a lawyer and through the courts. That's not done through the police. So anybody that's looking for further information about that does need to contact a lawyer. But that's an important thing for people to know, that there are those options, because unfortunately we've seen certainly older adults being taken advantage of financially for many, many years.
Thank you, Sergeant Brown. We appreciate that. Another really great question. How do we report fraud from the United States online, for example, computer repair, and what can Canadian police do outside of Canada?
Thank you for the question. Really good question. You know, jurisdictional boundaries certainly pose challenges to law enforcement. As you've probably seen in the news, there's been reporting and arrests made over in India tied to, you know, whether it's tech support or the CRA scam. And it took time for this to happen, simply because, you know, we have to rely on Indian authorities. We have to rely on Indian laws. You know, we have to make networks and connections with the law enforcement over there. So there's certainly challenges, but there are existing protocols, whether it's Interpol or even the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's liaison officer program. You know, so we do have international networks, and we do, like I said, work closely with our international partners. Specifically, we're part of an international mass marketing fraud working group, where a number of countries from around the world come together to discuss these types of fraud trends and the best ways to tackle them.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question. So Ron is asking, I hear about a scam where a company will ask a simple question that you are likely to say yes to. They record your yes and then insert it into another recording that makes it appear that you agreed to a sale at a specific cost. I think I received one of these lately. Are you aware of this tactic being used?
Anecdotally, we've received these reports. We're not aware of anybody becoming victimized this way or losing money this way. You know, it's a tough one to answer, but you know, I don't think it is possible. Albeit there, you know, with today's technology, anything is possible. If you say yes, have you provided them your financial information, your bank account, your credit card details? How exactly are you being billed for this? So there's lots of questions to answer there.
Yes, that's a big question. So I think we'll close it out with one last question, and this is really important, and it's sort of a theme of questions I see coming on around vulnerable populations and individuals with dementia. So this specific question is, I work with individuals in the community who are diagnosed with a form of dementia. Some of my clients may have mild dementia and could fall victim to these scams and not realize that they're being scammed. Also, I have clients who are further along in the disease process and their elderly spouse is overwhelmed with looking after their spouse, and they're at high risk of these schemes. I could provide them with information and warn them verbally. The problem is they are not going to remember what I said, or the written information will most likely get lost. Is there a way to block these calls? How is the best way I can protect these highly vulnerable individuals?
Yeah, I mean, so here, you know, here's a scenario where, you know, you may have to consider a power of attorney so that they can't, you know, send any money to any fraudsters. In terms of blocking calls, you know, talk to your phone providers. There's new call blocking technology being developed. Today, as you've seen in the news, the CRTC, Canadian Radio Telecommunications Commission, is you know, they've mandated the telcos, the telephone companies in Canada, to come up with ways to filter these calls, to authenticate these calls. So step one, I mean, if you want to block the calls, certainly talk to the phone providers, see what they might have available as a means to block these calls. I'll also take an opportunity to plug our senior support unit here. We do have a unit here that does offer some support to people who are experiencing a high volume of fraud, where we'll do callbacks and you know, a routine basis to try and support these people.
Jeff, if I can just jump in there, because that's an excellent point. It's Laura from the OPP. I'm just looking at this question, and it's a really important one. With respect to the individuals at an earlier point, or that have mild dementia at an earlier point, unfortunately, it still comes back down to capacity. So it's really, really important to constantly be repeating the prevention tips so that those do become as much a habit as absolutely possible for them. In terms of written cues, there may be things that you could help your clients' families post around their house that will be in a highly visible place next to the telephone or computer. As it pertains to the caregivers, I can certainly appreciate how caregiver burnout plays a huge role on this and in vulnerability. So I will also plug another organization. The Alzheimer's Society has chapters and offices all over Ontario. They certainly work with organizations, including ours. So if the individuals that you're talking about and the family members are not connected with them, please consider doing so. Not only can some of those conversations be coming up regularly at their caregiver support groups, we certainly have, and we would absolutely continue to attend those again as guests and reiterate the same information.
Thank you, Laura. So thank you all to our speakers for participating today and sharing the great knowledge of resources and your expertise on all these issues in prevention. There's been a lot of questions around if this is going to be posted. So both the recording and the PowerPoint that will be into a PDF form will be posted on our website under training and then webinars. So give us a few days to get that organized and it will be posted. The other thing, just to inform people, we will be doing a series of other webinars in the future relating to more support and financial abuse issues, but more around from a protection point of view, what's available, what supports, and how we can protect those who are vulnerable in our communities during these times. So stay tuned. If you're on our email list, you will be getting that correspondence. If you're not already joining our mailing list, you can go onto our website at www.eapon.ca. A pop-up menu will come up and you can just sign up online fairly quickly. So thank you again, everyone, and all of our experts on the panel today, and have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.